This spiritual perspective episode is about how to give feedback. Have you ever tried to give somebody feedback or constructive criticism, and you were really coming from a good place? All you wanted to do was help them attract more of what they say that they want. But while you're giving your feedback or after you gave your feedback, you notice that they got defensive, their arms were crossed, they called you a hypocrite, and they got triggered, and the whole thing went sideways. Now, when that kind of thing happens, initially we may think, well, they just don't want to grow. Or we say, that's why they're stuck. I tried to help them and they rejected my help. But if they've made some sound decisions in their life and they got defensive or triggered after you gave them your feedback or your constructive criticism, chances are you didn't follow the steps to having your feedback received and even appreciated. Now, you're probably wondering, steps? What steps? Exactly. Giving feedback is an art, and many of us have not practiced the art of giving feedback or constructive criticism. And that's why we get the crossed arms. That's why the person stops listening. That's why they lash out at how hypocritical we're being. And it may even result in us breaking up with that friendship or with that relationship, which is not what we ultimately wanted when we first decided to give the feedback. So in this episode, we are going to go over the 5 steps of giving feedback and having that feedback be received, that's important, from the spiritual perspective. Meaning, we want to give feedback in a way that does not trigger the other person, but instead, it actually brings you closer to the other person. And then at the end, I'm going to share one question that will completely shift the energy of any hard conversation you're having and convert it into something that both people will be able to walk away from feeling lighter and more connected. All right, let's get into it. When you feel called to help someone by giving them constructive criticism or feedback, your first step before you say anything is you're going to ask that person for permission to give them feedback. And that can sound just like, hey, I have a thought about this situation that happened the other day. Is that something you'd be open to hearing? And the reason why this is important is because a lot of times when we want to give feedback in the moment, it may not be convenient for the other person to receive that feedback. Maybe they're thinking about something, maybe they're working on something else, and they just don't have the mental or the energetic space to receive feedback in that moment. We've all been there. And it's just a show of consideration to ask for permission before we start to tell them what we think they can do to improve. This also gives them agency over when and whether they are open to hearing your feedback. Now, obviously, 99% of the time, they're going to say, sure, tell me what's on your mind. Or they'll say, now is not a great time because of X, Y, and Z reasons, but how about we meet later? If they value your friendship or your relationship or your connection, then they are going to agree to hear your feedback. And if they don't value your feedback, that's feedback too about your relationship. And maybe it's not your place to offer feedback or criticism for the quality of the dynamic that you have. Either way, you're not forcing anything onto them. And there's something that happens when they give you permission. It automatically opens them up to receive a lot more than they would be if you just kind of forced your opinion onto them, which at the end of the day, let's be honest, your feedback is your opinion. It's not a fact. It's your opinion based on your own life experiences. Granted, it's coming from a good place, but if they don't like what you're saying or if they don't resonate with your perspective, they are going to see it as an opinion. So this way, you're not catching them off guard. They've had a chance to say yes. They've opened the door, and if they say no, that's okay too. Again, maybe it's not the right moment and you can always circle back. But if they say yes, that means that they've agreed to receive. You're not pushing it. You're actually being invited. And that subtle shift turns the whole thing from a confrontation into a collaboration. Now, this is the next step that a lot of people tend to get wrong. We go in assuming that we already know the full story. We already see the full picture. And then we just blurt out the critique. Now, instead of doing that, you want to do some discovery. You want to get more information. You want to lead with curiosity to find out what their intention was. And that can sound like, hey, let me ask you, what was your intention when you said this thing that you said, or you did this thing that you did? Or how are you feeling going into that interaction with that other person? Or what did you really mean when you said XYZ, right? Now, this is really important. You don't want to sound like you're a prosecutor or you're a police detective and you're interrogating anyone or you're trying to build a case against them. You want to come from a place of curiosity and genuine understanding. You really want to understand what their experience is. You don't want to make any assumptions about anything. Because here's the thing. We all do stuff that doesn't land with another person from time to time, but almost always we have our reasons. And when we take time to ask what their reason was, it shows respect. It shows that you're respecting them in the same way that you would respect yourself. Like they must have had a good reason. It shows humility. You don't know everything there is to know about everything. And it says, I want to see what you saw. So in other words, it's a symptom of that space of collaboration that you are creating. And once you've taken that step, you've given them a chance to share their perspective on what they were experiencing. Then you validate their experience. And this is also key because even if you didn't agree with what they did, you can still acknowledge that they were probably doing the best that they could under the circumstances. You might even say, oh, I see now you were just trying to help. Or it's clear that you care very deeply. Or it looks like your heart was in the right place. And when someone hears that, it relaxes their nervous system. And they say to themselves, wow, you're so right about me. You get me. And that's the inner dialogue you want that other person to say, again, before you offer your critique. That allows them to feel seen, to feel heard, and they become way more open to hearing the other things that you might have to say. Because now they're not bracing for the attack that they anticipate coming when you say, hey, I have some feedback for you. They're not in their head crafting their defense. Whereas if you just launched into your feedback about what they could do better or what they did wrong, their inner dialogue is completely going to shift. And they're going to start thinking, oh my God, you're so wrong about me. How could you be so wrong about me? And they stop listening to what you're saying and they start to craft their defense. And they start to find ways that you're being a hypocrite. And they start to cut you off in the middle of your critique so they can tell you all the things that you've done wrong and how you're in no position to lecture them on how to do this other thing better that you're giving them feedback about, which is obviously not what anybody wants, right? Because now it's like it's you against them instead of you being collaborators, and how to strengthen the dynamic of your friendship or relationship. We want them to feel seen so that they can let their guard down and they can stop thinking of their defense and they start actually listening. And then we give our actual feedback. But we don't want to give all of the feedback at once. We want to start with a broad stroke feedback. Hey, in that situation, I think you could have communicated a little more effectively. And then just kind of pause. And you may ask, would you be open to hearing what I mean by that? Again, every time you get permission, it allows them to collaborate more with you. And if they say yes, which they're going to do, then you go a little bit deeper. The other day when you said X, it kind of came off like it was a dismissal. And I don't think that's what you meant, but that's how it landed. And then again, you can stop. You can give it a little bit of space. You don't have to stack 10 examples on top of each other. You just start with one little seed, let it sit, see how they respond to it. They may say, what do you mean? And you can elaborate more. And you can kind of keep going like that. And eventually they may say, just tell me everything. Tell me everything you're feeling. And you can start to tell them everything you're feeling. Now, the other thing about giving feedback is you don't want the feedback to go into this zone of character assassination and talk about, I think you're being selfish. I think you're being this. You want to talk about it more so from what you experienced. I felt disregarded. I felt like my opinion didn't really matter. I know that's not what you meant, but that's how it made me feel. You can keep validating their experience. And then you could reiterate the ultimate goal, which is, I want us to be closer. I want us to be stronger as friends or as a couple. And that's why I'm bringing this up with you. So again, it's not about them having to defend their character with you. You're basically asking for context into why they behaved in a certain way, which again, maybe they were going through something you don't know. That's why you're bringing this up in the first place. And so once you have your dialogue, however it goes, hopefully it stays above board and everybody feels seen because you've taken the time to ask for permission and ask for context and you were curious and you were leading with understanding as opposed to trying to be right. After you go through all of that, you want to close the conversation with gratitude and appreciation. And this part is huge because you're reminding them, again, this is not about a gotcha moment. You're not trying to catch them doing something wrong. you can communicate that because they were willing to have this conversation, they have actually inspired you. And you might say something like, I really admire how you show up. I really admire the way you speak up, even when it's uncomfortable. That's actually taught me to be bolder in my own communication. Or honestly, you've helped me grow just by observing how you live. And that's what will make the conversation feel human to them, because it's not just about exerting power. It's not about being someone's teacher. It's about holding each other to a shared standard. Not so either of you can be perfect, but so both of you can have a more positive impact on each other and on the people around you. And so you're saying this from a very genuine place. I'm in this with you. I'm not above you. I'm actually beside you. We're doing this together. This is us against the issue, whatever the issue is. And that's what makes the feedback feel like a gift instead of a judgment, instead of a condemnation. So here's a quick recap of those 5 spiritual keys to giving feedback. Number 1, you want to ask for permission before you launch into your feedback. Number 2, you want to make sure you lead with a tone of curiosity. You can ask questions and it can sound like an interrogation, or it can sound like genuine curiosity. You want to make sure you're erring on the side of that tone of genuine curiosity. Third, you want to make sure you validate their experience. Fourth, you want to offer the feedback in layers and allow them to respond if needed, or to continue giving you permission, or to validate where you're going with it, because you may be making some assumptions that are incorrect. And if you stack 5 or 10 assumptions on your version of how the whole thing went, you may find them becoming increasingly more defensive. And finally, you always want to end with gratitude and appreciation, because after all, this person is in your life because you see value in that dynamic and you want to reiterate what that value is. We all love hearing that. And if you want to take it one step further, try asking yourself this question before you even have the conversation. What has this person taught me? How has their example helped me personally to grow? And let that be the energy that you're leading with. Let that be the foundation, because when feedback comes from that kind of place, as opposed to coming from your ego or from this idea that you're better than the other person in the way you would have dealt with the situation, and instead it's coming from this place of shared growth, then it's just not going to be received better. It actually is going to help both of you transform. And so that's the spiritual perspective on giving feedback. If you want to go deeper, I've written several books about these kinds of topics, in addition to spirituality, meditation, happiness, inspiration, personal growth, etc. And if you have a specific situation that you would like to get some insight on from that spiritual perspective, you can book a one-on-one consultation with me. All the details are below. And if you like this episode, check out my episode on what to do if your partner does not want to grow. And I have another episode on how to move on from a friendship that no longer feels aligned. Otherwise, I will see you in the next Spiritual Perspective episode.